to be working on Mudkip. So the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to download your front and side view photos. So I already have those saved. So we've got our front view right here and the side view right here. I've also put them in a folder and I left them on my desktop just to get there to it easily. So one of the things you might notice right now is I'm going to be using not only a newer version of Maya, but I'm also going to be working on a Mac. So a couple of the controls are a little different, but basically if you ever see me click on, let's just say Control Z, let me move this over here. If you see this icon right here, just consider that as the control button. And this icon right here is the Alt button. So if you're working on Windows, that's pretty much all you really need to know. So the first step is I'm going to set my project up. And what I'll do is I'll go to File, Set Project. I'm going to go to Desktop. I'm going to go to my Mudkip folder. And I'm going to hit Set. And then hit Create Default Workspace. And what this does is Maya will now know exactly where your files are saved and where they're going to go. So this way, if you move to another computer or anything like that, everything should be ready to go and everything should work properly. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hit space to switch into my 4 views. I'm going to go to my side view right here. I'm going to go to View, Image Plane, Import Image. So now I can see my side view right here. It automatically goes to that folder since we set the project. And I'm going to add it right there. I'm then going to go to my front view on the left side right here. I'm going to go to View, Image Plane, Import Image, and I'm going to go find that front view. So I now have both images set up. What I'm going to do is, if you look closely, the images aren't working perfectly together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch to my scale tool by clicking on R. And I'm just going to scale it up so that the images roughly match together. These are 2 different images, so they're not going to match up perfectly. You could also see by how this front view has the mouth open while the side view the mouth is closed, but that's okay. We'll just kind of eyeball it later on. So what I'm doing is I'm just kind of using my pictures to basically match up everything. So I'll try to get the top of the head to match with the top of the head, the top of this fin piece to go with the fin, and the bottom of the feet with the bottom of the feet. Now, both these look pretty good for now, and if I need to adjust them, I could always do that later on. The next step I'm going to do is I'm going to select my side view, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to want to push this side view all the way to the left over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my channel box and layer editor over here, and I'm going to go where it says Translate X, and I'm going to type in -10. I'm going to hit enter, and it flings it all over there. I'm going to do the same with my front view, except since I'm looking at it from the Z axis, I'm going to bring it back. I'm going to go to Translate Z, type in -10, and bring that back like that. So now both my images are kind of going towards one corner, and that's exactly what we want. So the next thing I'll do is I'm going to drag a box around both of them right here, and I'm going to create a new layer. So to create a new layer, I'm going to go to the bottom right here in my channel box and layer editor, and you're going to see these 4 icons. I'm going to click on the one all the way to the right, and that's going to create a new layer. And since I had both images selected when I did that, both should go to that layer. So if I click on the V for visibility, they should both disappear. So I'm going to lock that layer by clicking on this box right here, make sure it says R, and that sets it as a reference layer. So that means I can no longer select these. If I need to change anything ever, I could always click on the R again, and I'll take it off the reference layer. So now that I have that, what I could do is start working on the model itself. Next thing I'm going to do is start creating the model itself. And to do that, it's pretty simple. We're going to start with a very small amount of geometry and work our way up and basically go piece by piece. So I'm going to go to Create, Polygon Primitives, and I'm going to start with a cube. In most cases, you're going to start with a cube. It's just a lot easier to work with than a sphere or anything else, because it just has that general shape and you have a lot of ways you can work with it. So I'm going to go to where it says Inputs, Polycube 1, and I'm going to change the subdivision width, height, and depth. I'm going to change them all to 4. This way I have a nice amount of geometry. It's small, but I can work with it. And now we're ready to start modeling. So I'm going to start with my front view. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to first hit the X-ray button. The X-ray button is this icon right here. It looks like 2 intersecting squares. And that'll just allow it to be somewhat transparent so we can see our reference behind the object. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hit W to get to my move tool. And I'm going to bring it roughly to where the body is. So obviously the head is in the way. We're going to just ignore the head for now. And we'll create the head as a separate object. So we're just going to kind of use the curves of the natural body to kind of figure out what we're creating and how we're going to create it. So in this case, my cube is scaled pretty well. If you never need to scale it, you could always go. But we're going to start with this. So I'm going to right click, drag to Vertex Mode. And I'm going to start with this middle row. So I'm going to drag a box along the middle row. I'm going to switch to my scale tool by pressing R. And I'm only going to use the X-axis scale. The reason we're going to be doing this is we want to scale everything symmetrically from one view. I'm not going to use the center scale tool because that'll bring it inwards at once. I can actually show you that. So if let me get a better angle, use the scale tool, everything is going towards the center, which we don't really want because we're not going to know what's going on over here. So we're just going to use this scale tool right here, the X-axis, so that way things don't change in the side view because we're going to need to work with that after. So I'm just going to go. And I'm going to scale these until it roughly hits the edge of Mudkip's arms. Normally we'd probably have it as an object that would attach to the body this way, but for Mudkip, just to keep things simple, we're going to go with just this body shape. So I'm then going to move on to the next row, and you get that rough roundness of the body. So once we get to the bottom, I'm going to select these 3. I'm going to switch to my move tool and just kind of lower them a bit. Then I'll select that middle one right there and lower that too. So that way we're getting this rough, round shape. So what we're going to end up doing is I'm going to scale inwards like this. And we're going to get that top portion right there. And since we can't really see the top of his body, we're just going to have to eyeball it. So what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to raise it up like that. And I'm going to raise this like that. We just want that curved shape. If it's not perfect, that's okay. But this is the rough shape we're going to want. So now that we've finished the front view, we're going to switch to our side view. Let me zoom in on it a bit. And as you see, it's going to be a little guesswork for this as well. I'm also going to turn on X-ray mode again. And what we're going to end up doing is I'm going to take this, and since Mudkip is a bit of a small animal, I'm just going to scale it a little bit that way, move it, and then we're going to use this as our reference. So what I'm going to end up doing is pretty much the same thing as we did with the front view, except we're going to do it using the vertical lines. So what I'll do is I'll switch to my scale tool, and I'm going to use the Y-axis scale, and I'm going to lower it down that way. I'll switch to my move tool and lower it just so the top right here and the bottom right here match up. I'm then going to do the same thing. So in this case, I could just move it and then scale it. For the head, we're going to kind of ignore the head and just go by where the neck is attaching. So we'll just lower this down, bring that down like that. I'll take this one. And all I'm doing is just using the scale tool and the move tool just to kind of get this shape from our side view. And if it doesn't match up perfectly, that's okay. We always could adjust things later on. So now what I have, if I look at it from this view right here, we've got a rough shape of Mudkip's body. So it's pretty square from the top, but we'll work on that after. We're going to focus on just getting the rest of this portion of his body in the front as well. So what I'm going to do is we're going to work with extrusions. So extrusions can be very tricky to work with. It's probably the hardest thing to get used to when modeling, but once you get used to it, it's extremely useful. So what we want to do is I essentially want these back faces right here, and I want to bring them out towards the tail. And I'm going to do that using extrusions. So you could do it a couple of different ways. The easiest way is to just kind of hold shift on your keyboard and click on each one of these faces. So make sure you're in face mode. And I'm just going to click on each one of these. You can press Q if you have arrows or anything in your way. Q will just cancel out whatever command you currently, or whatever tool you're using. So now that I have all those back faces selected, what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to hit Control E, and that's going to do an extrusion. You could also go to Edit Mesh and extrude right here, but I'm going to do an extrusion like that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this icon right here. This will kind of center everything to the world, so it's a lot easier to work with. Sometimes if you have weird angles going on, it'll go all in all different directions, makes it a lot more difficult to kind of model it how you want. So I usually just do it to the world just to make life a lot easier for myself. So now I have one extrusion done. It doesn't look like anything changed, but using these tools right here, the arrows and the scale tools, I'll be able to work with this piece for an extrusion. So what I'll do is I'll just kind of go, and for this part, since I know it's kind of tapering towards the back, I can use that center scale. It'll just kind of give me a little less work to do later on. But if you want to just scale it the way you've been doing it, that's fine too. So now I'll do one extrusion just to right there. That looks pretty good. So I'm going to do another extrusion right here to kind of get this piece of his neck. And that's kind of going at an angle. So what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to do another extrusion. I'm just going to be selecting the back face, well, the front face is a different way, but you could do it the same way as you did in the back by just selecting it manually. And I'm basically going to do the exact same thing. So I'm going to do another extrusion, and I click on this icon right here to center it out. And I'm just going to scale it, rotate it, and move it into place. If it's not perfect, again, don't worry too much about it. It should smooth out on its own later. So that looks pretty good for that portion of his body. And now we're going to add a little bit more roundness to it. So if we look at it from the top view right here, it's not super round. So what we'll do is we'll just take some of these vertices and just kind of scale them using the x-axis scale, just to kind of add a little more roundness to it. We don't want Mudkip being super boxy. So just doing something small like that will add a nice amount of roundness to it. And now we have roughly Mudkip's body. I might end up making this part a little smaller, just so it looks a little bit nicer. So I'll just scale these inwards. And if I do a smooth preview of what we have right now, that looks pretty good for his body, at least. So the next thing we're going to work on is his feet. So if we look at our side view, his feet are kind of connecting in the side right here. In our case, we're not going to really do that, but in other models you would end up attaching it from the side. If you were to do like an actual animal like a dog or a deer or anything like that, they will come in from the side. But in our case, we're going to go the little simpler route, and we're just going to do it through this area right here and just go straight into it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create one foot. So I'll go to Create, Polygon Primitives, and I'm going to create a cylinder. So the first thing that you should always do is lower the amount of geometry on a cylinder you're making, because as of right now we have a 20-sided cylinder. If I go to my subdivision axis, it says 20. We're going to want that to be a much lower number because it'll be a lot easier for us to attach to Mudkip's body. So I'm just going to hit 8 just to lower the amount of geometry that we're working with. I might add a little bit more geometry to the height. Let's just go with 3, see how that looks. Let's actually change it to 4. That should be more than enough. So now that we have this cylinder ready to become a leg, we're going to go and we're going to pretty much do the same thing as we did before. We're going to go scale it so it's roughly the size or thickness of Mudkip's leg. And it doesn't really matter for the legs which one you do first. You can do it through the side view or the front view first. Legs are pretty cylindrical, so you're not going to really need to do too much to them. So what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to take this bottom row of vertices and I'm just going to move them and scale them using the center scale tool just into place like that. Normally we would use a little bit better pictures, but these should work just fine. So all I'm doing is I'm going through each set of these vertices and scaling them and trying to match them up as best as we can to the leg shape. So if we need to scale it, we could always scale it. And let's see how that looks right now. So I'm going to take this piece right here from the front view, and I'm just going to move it to this view right here. So if we look at it, I probably added too much geometry, but that's okay. We could always get rid of it, or in this case, I'm just going to use it and just kind of redistribute it a little bit better, just to kind of get everything into place a little nicer. So I'm just double clicking on these edges, and I'm just kind of moving them into a good spot. So for this top portion right here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of the vertices for this piece right here. So I'm going to go and select these top ones right here. I'm going to lower them, and I'm also going to rotate it. So if we look at the leg right here, we're going to connect it going this way, kind of going into the body like that. So what I'll do is I'll switch my rotate tool by pressing E, and I'm just going to move and scale it so it has a nice shape to the body. Okay. So I now have my rough shape of Mudkip's leg, and we can just look at it from the different angles. I can smooth it out to see how it looks. That looks pretty good. So one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this leg and I'm just going to end up duplicating it. So I'm going to hit Control D, and I'm going to move it to the back leg. We're going to be working on this pretty symmetrically, and in doing so, it saves us a lot of time and trouble later on when we have to do the other side. So I'm just going to create another leg here just to keep it for later on. So the next thing I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to take the leg and we're going to start getting ready to attach it to the body. So I'm going to start with this leg right here. I'm going to lower it a bit, and I'm going to kind of see where it's attaching to the body. So like I said before, we changed this geometry to an 8 sides in a subdivision axis. So I'm going to select these 8 sides right here, and I'm just going to delete them. I'm then going to do the same thing on these 4 faces, and that's going to give me an 8-sided hole right here. The easiest way to figure out how many sides your hole is by just kind of going into edge mode, holding shift, and basically just kind of clicking on each one while counting. So 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It just kind of makes it a little easier to see where you're going to be attaching a leg or any object to the other object. So now that I know I have the same amount of holes right here and on the leg, it's time to select them both. So I'll just drag a box around them while being in object mode, so they both light up like that. I'm going to go to mesh and then combine. This way the computer now thinks that these two objects are actually one object, which is good because we need that in order to attach them together, but it's bad because there are 2 holes right here. But we're going to fill those holes right now. So the next thing we're going to do is I'm going to go to Mesh Tools, and I'm going to go to the Pen to Polygon tool. What that should do is as soon as I click it, the borders around those 2 holes should light up. That's allowing me to know where there's a hole in our object so we can attach them. And I usually like to eyeball it, and I'll go from one side directly across to the other side, and then I'm going to hit G. So G will allow us to repeat the last command that we did, not just for the Pen to Polygon tool, it's pretty much for any tool you use. Just one side to the other side, and you hit G. If you ever run into a problem, you could always just go to Mesh Tools, a Pen to Polygon tool, and start the tool up again on your own. This I just find is a little faster, so press G. One side to the other side, G. I'll go around one side, the other side, G. And if you ever run into a mistake, you could always hit backspace and it'll get rid of that while it's still pink. So just like that. Now I've got 2 more spots to fill. So this is going to go over here, and the last one I'm just going to go across this way just to see. So everything looks pretty good. I could work on moving this vertex right here out a little bit just so it's a little neater, but it's not super necessary, but you would want to do it later on. now that we have one leg attached, we do have, because it was lower, we are going to need to raise it back up, because if we look at it in our front view, you can see that it's a lot lower than it should be. So what I'll end up doing is I'll try to make sure I select all the vertices before those faces that we created, and I'm just going to use the move tool and bring them on up. If it's off by a little bit, that's okay. We just don't want to go too crazy with it, because we don't want pieces going inside the model like too much like that. So in this case, we should be pretty okay, and if we need to adjust these vertices later on, we always can, just to smooth things out. So now that we've got one leg done, we're going to do the exact same thing on the other leg. So I'll lower it a bit, oops, and I'll delete the faces just like we did with the front leg. So I'll just select those faces while holding shift, because that's going to allow us to select multiple things at once. Get rid of them. Oops, I missed a face. Get rid of that too. Going to do the same thing on Mudkip's body, so I'm just going to delete these one at a time. So I delete those 4 faces. And now we're going to do the same process of combining it and then appending it together. So combine, append to polygon, one side to the other, and we shall continue. So this is a little bit of a tedious process, but as you get better, you could go through it. I'm just going to go a little slower just to make sure you can see exactly where I'm attaching things and how they're going to get put into place. So, oops, do not want to do that. And now we have the 2 legs. So I'm just going to go, I'm going to kind of get this one from the side view. Just raise it up a bit. Ooh, I think I need to get that extra row. So if you ever need to get an extra row of vertices or faces like that, you could hold shift and press period, and it should select the next row up. It's usually a lot more useful later on, but I'm just going to use it right now just to get a rough shape. It's not going to match up perfectly, but that's okay. So now what I have here is Mudkip's body. So we still have the piece of his tail right there, and we could do that a couple of different ways. We could work with extrusions, or we could attach another object. I think for this, extrusions should be good enough. So what I'll do is I'm going to work with these back faces right here. So let me just select these right here. And I'm going to pull those out a little bit just to kind of give a little piece of the body, so round it out right here. I'll scale these inwards a little bit just so we have a little spot where the tail is going to come out. So what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to do one extrusion. I'll click the icon right here, and I'm going to bring it out pretty far back like this, just to show another way. You could do it using a series of extrusions, but I want to just show it this way just so you can see a different way of doing it. So what I'll do is I'll use these vertices that I now have. I'm going to switch to move tool, and I'm just going to spread them out along the tail. So it's not going to be perfect, but that's perfectly fine. I'm just going to try to get them into the rough shape while using the amount of geometry that I already have. So I'm just going to bring those there, that there. I might even lower this one over here. And that looks pretty good. So that's going to be the rough shape of our tail. And we're going to use what's called the Insert Edge Loop tool just to add more geometry to the tail so we can fill out all these different areas. So I'm going to put an edge loop right there. I'll get one right there. And right there. So you could achieve the exact same thing if you did it for extrusions, but I thought it'd be better just to show that. So next thing I'm going to do is the same process as before. I'm going to select some of these vertices, and I'm going to start just kind of spacing them out to kind of fill in the area that we were missing on our tail. So pretty simple, doesn't have to be too accurate, it will round out in the end. So I've got that, that, and that. So We still have this area right here and right here. We could put an edge loop right there if we want to get very picky with it, which I'll probably end up doing. So I'm just going to hit G to add another edge loop. And I'll fix that area up. Just kind of bring it into place. And I'm going to insert an edge loop right here. And I'm going to add one right here. So with that, I can take these vertices and just kind of bring them out over that way and that way. Luckily, Mudkip's tail is, from what I think, pretty straight. It doesn't really taper too much. So we could just leave it like that, but if we ever needed to, we could always scale it. So if I just smooth this out, that looks pretty good. If we wanted to get very detailed to get these edges, we could also do that, which I will show you, but it's not usually necessary. So to do that, what I'll do is I'll have this series of vertices, or this edge right here, try to line up as best as we can with that edge. So I'm just going to go in like that, like that. I'm going to do the same for the one down here. It's kind of tough to see, but just try your best and you get that detail in. So that should be pretty good, like that. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go and insert an edge loop very close to that edge. So I'll put one right there, one right there, and I'm going to do the same for the bottom portion right here and right here. We are adding a lot of geometry to our model, but to get that detail, you sometimes need to get that extra geometry in there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this edge right here, and I'm going to hold shift, double click on the other side, and that's just going to bring it over together. So I'm going to look at it from my perspective view, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to move those inwards a bit. That's going to create that little divot, and as I smooth it out, you can see that detail kind of come in. The reason it's happening is because we have these edges that we added before, and that allows us to kind of keep the detail right, very hard edge right at the end, right there, and the ones that we moved inwards are coming together just like that. I am just going to double check. We never want to have this edge go farther than the inner edge, but from the looks of it, everything looks really nice. Don't worry about doing it on the other side because we're going to end up mirroring it to the other side anyway. So we now have a good portion of the body finished, and we can start working on the head. So what I'm going to end up doing is I'm just going to add this to another layer just so it's out, I can get it out of my way for now if I need. So I'm just going to hide it. So the head is pretty spherical. So these are one of those cases where we can end up using a sphere, but we're also going to make sure we use a small amount of geometry. So I'm going to create a sphere. I'm going to go to poly sphere 1. I'm going to change the subdivision axis and height to 8 by 8. So this is going to be a very low amount of geometry, but it's going to end up working out in the end, and we could always add more later. So the first step is I'm going to go to my front view, and I'm just going to get the rough height of it. So that looks pretty good as it is. What I'm going to end up doing though is I'm going to rotate this about 90 degrees along the Z axis. So I could just type it right there. And the reason I'm doing that is so that the shape of it and the geometry is all symmetrical, and it's a lot easier to attach a 4-sided hole than an 8-sided hole to the body. So now I'm going to scale it using the X-axis scale tool. So, or actually this is the Y-axis now because we rotated it. And I'm just going to scale it as best as I can just to fit with the shape of Mudkip's head. We're going to end up adding more geometry to it later, but we just want this rough shape. We're not going to do the mouth on this one because we don't really have it on our side view, but we could always add it later on if we need. So if we look at it from our side view now, as you can see, it's not really matching up too well, but we could go into Vertex Mode, take some of these vertices right here, and just kind of move them into place. And this is just going to end up rounding it out a little bit more. If we wanted to, we could also go and scale it this way and then rotate it again along this axis just to kind of get that rough round shape. So I'm just going to go, that looks pretty good. Let me just make sure it's matching up. So In my case, the pictures aren't matching up perfectly, but for this head, it doesn't really matter too much. As long as we got that rough shape, we're good to go. So what I'm going to do is we're going to try to create that weird fin thing on the side of his face. In order to do that, what I'm going to use is a cube. So I'll go to Create, Polygon Primitives, Cube, and this is where things get a little tricky and you kind of need a little bit of guesswork to do it, because we're going to work with how much geometry we need for this. So one of the easiest ways to figure this out is we're going to find how many edges we want pretty much in our subdivision height. So if I go and increase it just like so, I'm just going to lower it for now, and then I'm going to recount it. So I know I need one edge right here, so go into the tip right there. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So I'm going to try this, and we're going to see how well that looks. What I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to select these vertices right here. I'm going to kind of move them. I'm going to scale them down using the y-axis scale, rotate them a bit. I'm just going to kind of center it along where it would be attaching to Mudkip's head. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just use our move tool and just kind of line things up properly. So that one will go there. That one will go there. I usually start with the outer edges just to kind of get a rough idea. And I'm just going to kind of work my way into moving each vertex at every sharp edge of Mudkip's fins, just like this. So in this case, I end up having one too many. So what we could do is I could either just move this over here and then have this one go there, or I could just redo the shape. It doesn't really matter too much in this case, but I think what I'm going to end up doing, just because it's a little more detailed, I'll just move that there, and that there. Again, they don't have to be perfect, because once we round it out, it should fit into place. So I'll probably end up moving this a little bit farther, but for now, that's okay. The next thing I want to do is I want to insert a couple more edge loops. So I'm just going to put one edge loop right about here, just to kind of give it a little bit more structure so that when we smooth things out, it's a little more solid. After that, we can start getting ready to attach to the head. So if we look at it right here, we got 10. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Means 5 on the other side. So that's 10, 11, and 12. So by deleting these 5 faces right here, we have a 12-sided hole. So what we need to do is we need to get a 12-sided hole over here. If I look right here, we have 8 sides, but we can always add more to get that to 12. So what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to insert an edge loop right about here. So that changes it into 9 sides. Actually, I'm not going to add one there. I'm going to add one here. So that's going to change that to 9, that to 10, that to 11, and that to 12. So even though we still have 8 faces we're getting rid of, it's going to be 12 sides because we have these faces split. So I'll go delete all these right here. Not you. And we're going to get rid of that. So I'm going to bring this back over here. And before I even attach them, I'm just going to scale this a little bit better since we didn't do that. So I'll scale it down that way. And what I'm going to do is, if you can see it from the side view, kind of puffs out a little bit. I'll take that edge that we added before. So let's see if it lets me select it. I'll just double click that so it goes all the way around. And I'm just going to use the Z-axis scale just to kind of puff it out a little bit. This will just kind of give us a little bit more of a shape to the fin. Okay, that looks good. And now I'm just going to move this out to the side a little bit, just so it's a little easier to attach. I'll select both. Mesh, combine, so they're both one object, so we can attach them. Mesh tools, append to polygon. So I'll start at the top right here just because that'll be the easiest one to see to attach. And then I'm just going to go one side to the other side, press G. One side to the other side, press G. One side, the other side. And it may get a little crazy in certain areas, but that's okay. For this basic model, we don't really need to worry about retopologizing it at all. This is more of just getting down the basics. So this will go there, this will go there, this will go here, this will go to here. We've got 2 more to do. Always remember you could rotate around your object if you need to get better angles. In case you forget, the keyboard commands for those is Alt and left mouse click will allow you to rotate around it. Alt and middle mouse click, so clicking down your scroll wheel, will allow you to pan around your object. And Alt and right mouse click will allow you to zoom in and zoom out. You could also use your scroll wheel, but Alt right click will give you a little bit more control. So now Mudkip's fin piece is attached. We just got to go and kind of get them into place. So I'm just going to select all these vertices right here and just kind of move them back into place. So I do see a little bit of weird shaping right here, so I'm just going to take those vertices and I'm just going to kind of spread them out a little bit more. Again, it's probably because I've been modeling this to a piece that has an open mouth and a closed mouth. So again, we don't really worry too much. We're just going to get that rough shape. That looks pretty good. I'm a little picky, so I'm just going to spread these out a little bit better. But you don't really have to too much. So just move them like that. And next thing I want to do is if I smooth this out, the fin doesn't look that great. So we're going to do the same thing as we did with the tail by adding a couple of extra edge loops just to kind of shape this out a little bit better. So if I add one right around here, one right around there, as you can see it's going all the way around, but that's okay. We're adding a lot of geometry that we don't really want to work with normally, but if I smooth this out now, it's a lot sharper and a lot better shaped. So that looks pretty good for that. The next thing we're going to do is this top fin. So if we look at it, his top fin's pretty much made the same way as the tail, so we're going to do the same process as that. The first thing I want to do is I want to make sure we have some geometry in the right spot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this vertex just around there, roughly, and I'm going to want to insert an edge loop right here. The reason I'm doing that is we kind of want to box things in, and in doing so allows us to extrude a lot easier. So we boxed in from the side, and I'm going to want to do it from the front now. So if I zoom in and find that rough spot where the that top fin is coming out of, I'm going to put one right there and one right there. Okay. Now that we have that done, what I'm going to do is I'm going to find that top piece where the fin starts popping out. So that's right there. So right there all the way to right about here. So I'm just going to zoom in. I'm going to select all those faces that we just found. I'm going to double check that in a little bit. Just make sure. Nope, that was too far. I'm going to hold shift and deselect those. And we're going to start with our extrusions again. I'm going to do this from the side view. And I'm going to just hit Control E. I'm going to click on this icon. I'm going to do one extrusion up just like that. Again, I'm going to start spreading these out to kind of shape out the area. So I'll just zoom in for you guys to see. And I'm going to take this vertex, or series of vertices, bring them over there. Bring these over to there. And I'm just going to try to space these as well as I can. So that looks pretty good there. I'm definitely going to need some more edge loops, but we should be able to get something nice. I may move some of these around just to kind of set things up better for when I do this portion. So I'm actually going to do that right now, just to move it a little bit, just so I have some geometry to work with when I want to create that fin detail. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Mesh Tools, Insert Edge Loop. Can insert edge loop like that. I'm going to put a couple in here. I know I'm going to need them. I'm just going to add them right now, just so I don't have to do it later. And if I need more, I'll add more. So I'll just go take these. I'll put that there. I'm going to line these up already with that edge. just to speed things along. I'll bring this over to this side, this over to this side. I'm going to take these out and just move them a little bit just to kind of give it a little bit more roundness. I'm going to add another edge loop there just to get this top piece. So I'll just go hit G to redo my last command, which was insert edge loop, and I'm just going to move that there. All right. Next step, I'm going to move these vertices in place of that line just to create that detail piece. So I'm just going to bring those over there. And what I'll do is I'm going to insert another edge loop right at the end here, since I see that stopping right there. Now move the vertices there. Before I do that, just to save some time, I'm going to put an edge loop right here, both on either end, just so I already have that area prepared for when I need to move those. So I'm just going to zoom in. I'm going to take these vertices right here, and I'm just going to move those to where they should be going. It might be a little difficult to see, but it's just kind of going to the end of those little beveling edges. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take that center edge right here. So I'm just going to hold that, select them just like that, and I'll do the same on the other side. Come back to fix that. So I'm just going to zoom in to get that last one I missed. I'm actually going to probably deselect that one. Let's see. Yeah. I'm going to deselect this one. I'm just going to move them inwards. So that way we have that nice beveled edge. Okay. So just to look at it in object mode, we have a nice beveled edge right there. I could probably work on that a little bit more, but that's pretty good for now. And we now have Mudkip's head. So the last step we really need to do in modeling is we have to attach the head to the body, of course, and then we're going to mirror it. So I'm just going to bring these up like that. And I'm going to take a look from my side view just to see where I'm attaching the head to the body. So in this case, I'm going to probably take this whole area right here and attach it. So I'm just going to select here to about here. So I'll take this one specifically to here. And I'm going to look at that in perspective view just to kind of get an idea where I'm getting rid of faces. So that looks pretty good. I'm going to delete those faces for now. I'm going to hide the body. And I'm just going to delete these faces right here. I'm probably going to end up taking this row as well. So I'll just get rid of these along with it. So now that I have this whole portion, I can count how many edges I have to attach to the body. So I've got 1, 2, can't forget those little ones, 3, 4, 5, 6. Since I've been working symmetrically, it should be 6 on the other side. So that's 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. 16-sided hole. So what I'll end up doing is I'm going to take these as well just to kind of get them and keep everything a little neater and symmetrical. So 16 sides equates to 32. So when I'm going to take this head, I'm going to raise it up a bunch because we're going to need a little bit of space to figure out how we're going to get that spot open. So I'm going to bring the body back, and I'm going to look at where I'm attaching it. So I've got pretty much up to here. So I'm going to take this edge, that face, go to that one. So I know I have 32 to work with. And then on the body is a little bit more difficult because I've got 4, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So we're going to need to add some more geometry to this. So we've got 12-sided edge face right here, a hole. I'm going to insert a couple of edge loops. So, oops, clicked on the wrong tool. So I'll add one right there, one right there, one right there, and one right there. So that gives me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that's 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Still not enough. Just gonna take another look at my head. Most of them are on the sides. So just add a couple more. You do have to pay attention when you add these edge loops because we attach the legs. There are sometimes cases where it's going to go a loop around. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. That's 22, 23, 24, 25, 26. So again, closer. So this will give me 28, 32, 34, and I'll add one right here for 36. So now we have enough geometry to attach it. One thing I'm going to do is, because things aren't carried over here, is I'm just going to attach one side of it. So what I'll end up doing is I'm going to go to my front view. I'm going to look at the center of Mudkip's body right here. I'm going to take it and I'm going to just delete half of it, just like that. And we want to make sure that that is all on the line, which looks good. And I'm going to do the same with Mudkip's head. So I'll just take half of this right here, the ones that half that we didn't work on, we're just going to do that there. This way it's a lot easier for us to attach things because we don't have to worry about things matching up too well. So I'm just going to lower the head back down a bit and I'm going to start getting ready to attach it. So because we're only working on one side and we already deleted half of it, it's a little easier to attach, so we can actually have this lower because it will be a lot more difficult to attach later on. So I'm going to select these two pieces like that, and we're going to find a good spot to start working. So I'm going to start by combining the two objects together. Then we're going to append it. So this side will go to here, and we're just going to start working our way down. Just pay very close attention to where you're attaching things where, because we don't want to overdo this or miss a spot, because then we'll have to redo some pieces. And we're just going to go work our way through it. It does look like I did mess up somewhere. So I definitely messed up counting something. But that happens, that's okay. So I'll just go and I'll find where I messed up. And we do have a lot of extra geometry and a lot of things that we could work on. Let's get rid of some geometry. So this would be a great time to learn that. So when you have a situation like this where you do need to get rid of some geometry, all you really need to do is double click an edge and delete it. That will get rid of the edge loop. It is still split up, so if you look right here on this edge, it's splitting in half. So I'm just going to delete that, and I'm going to kind of get rid of a couple of these. And if I need to get rid of more, I can get rid of more. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Vertex Mode. I'm going to drag a box around all that area where I deleted vertices or delete edges, and that'll get rid of those extra vertices. It's very important to try to keep this as organized as possible and try to keep things as neat as you can. So in this case, I'm going to delete those. We'd end up having to remake that face, but that's not a big deal. Just get rid of this, and we'll give it another shot. So I'm just going to go and append to polygon. And this is going to go over here. This one's going to go over here. This will go over here. This will go over here. And it seems that we're still... Actually, I think we could be good. So if I go to this one, that attaches nicely. We should be actually okay with that. Oops. So let's see. There we go. So now that the head is attached to the body, everything looks nice. And we've got half a Mudkip right now. If I smooth it out, looks pretty good. We could smooth things more in the sense of the head, but I guess we could do that right now if we want. So I'm just going to go to the side view. It really depends on how much geometry you're working with and how much you need to do this, but I'm going to do it because it'll look a lot nicer in the end. So all I'm doing is just kind of doing all these little minor details. Just going to spread these out a little bit better. And that way the geometry is a little more evenly splayed out, and it will look a lot less boxy and a little more round and natural. So I'm just going to bring these like that. I'll do the same to the top right here and the side. This is all just to kind of do those little minor details that will make the whole model look better in the end. Just gonna spread these out while I'm doing it, just to kind of keep a nice flow going. Take all these like that. That should be good enough. Let me get this last piece right here that I missed. That looks a lot better. So if we round it out, yeah, it looks pretty good. So next step is we need to create the other side of Mudkip. So to do that, it's pretty simple. All we need to do is select it, and we're going to go to Mesh, and then we're going to go to Mirror, and we're going to go through the option box. So the option box, that little square to the right of where it said Mirror. So I'll just show that. I'll show that again. So Mesh, Mirror, little option box. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure World is selected. Cut Geometry is already set. We're going to merge border vertices, and we're going to flip on the mirror axis for X, since we're going from X to the other side X, and we're going to make sure the mirror direction is negative since we're going from positive to negative. I'm going to hit apply just in case this doesn't look great, but it looks like it came out pretty well. So I'll hit close, and that's pretty much all we have for our Mudkip. If I smooth it out, it looks pretty good. We can always smooth out these harder edges if we wanted to, but that'd be something for another project. For now, this is definitely good enough. What I'm going to do now is I want to kind of smooth it out a little bit more, so we're going to add a lot more geometry to it all at once. So the first thing is first, since I haven't done it in a while, I'm going to hit Control S to save it, because I never saved this. So I'm going to type in Mudkip, and I'm going to save it as a binary. It should automatically go into my folder. I'm going to hit save. It's also always very useful to save often. I should have said that in the beginning, but what are you going to do? So we got this, and we're going to smooth this out a lot. That way it'll look a little more round like this. So what I'll end up doing is I'm going to go to Mesh, and I'm going to go to where it says Smooth, and that'll basically double the amount of geometry you have and smooth it out for you. So that looks pretty good. It is lumpy in some areas, but like I said, this is just to go over the basics. And now we're going to render a photo. So what we're going to do is I'm going to just kind of find a nice angle for it. And we're going to click on the render display render view button. So that's this little clipboard with an eye on it. That should open up another window. I'm going to make sure Maya software is selected. In a lot of cases, yours will say Arnold renderer. We're just going to switch to Maya software if we need. So Maya software, and I'm going to click on the render button right here. And I'm going to render it out, which doesn't seem to want to do right now. Want to work, but all you really need to do is click on this icon right here, and it should render out your file. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to File, Save Image. I'm going to click on Color Manage Image. I'm going to save it to my desktop, or I can go into the Mudkip folder just to be even closer. And I'm going to make sure it's set to JPEG. JPEG is very important because the automatic render it has, you can't really open it. I'm just going to type in Mudkip, and I'm going to hit save. And after you do that, I'll just save my project again, just to make sure it saves those smooth edgings. And we're done. We finished up making Mudkip. So there you go.